Have you ever felt it? That strange little hiccup in the day? Like you've lost a second, or maybe gained one. It's a feeling you usually brush off, a trick of the mind. But in the town of Evermere, it's not a trick. It's a warning. There's something off about this place, something you can't quite put your finger on, but you can always feel it. It's like time itself holds its breath here, just for a moment, just long enough for you to notice something is wrong. It all started on a Tuesday. The air was thick and heavy, trapped beneath a blanket of clouds that refused to break. And then, at exactly 2 a.m., every clock in town stopped. The second hands froze mid-tick. The traffic lights went still, their colors locked in place. Even the air felt caught between breaths. But nobody noticed. Nobody, that is, except for Amelia Cross. Amelia was a crime novelist, sharp, disciplined, and just a little bit haunted. Her neighbors thought she was strange, the kind of woman who would notice if the mailman was 1 minute late, or if the streetlights on the next block flickered out of sync. That night, she woke up suddenly. There was no noise, no nightmare, just an unnerving stillness. The digital clock beside her bed glowed. 2 a.m. She reached for her phone. Same thing, 2 a.m. The seconds weren't ticking by. No movement at all. She tapped the screen. Nothing. At first, she almost laughed it off. A glitch, maybe? A localized blackout? But then she heard it. A low, continuous hum coming from outside her window. She pulled back the curtain, and her breath caught in her throat. The entire neighborhood was frozen. A cat was suspended mid-step on a fence. A child's swing hung motionless in the air, defying gravity. Even the rain. The droplets were hanging in the air like tiny glass beads. Her chest tightened. "What in the world?" she whispered into the silence. And then, just as suddenly as it stopped, it all came rushing back at once. The swing swayed. The cat leaped from the fence and vanished. The clocks ticked again. Her phone screen flashed to life. 3 a.m. She blinked, trying to process what just happened. The entire world had skipped an hour, and she was the only one who knew it. By morning, the street was alive with its usual rhythm. But across the road, something felt deeply wrong. Her neighbor, Dr. Adrian Vale, a well-respected neurologist, hadn't left for work. His car was still parked in the driveway, its engine cold, but the lights inside his house were on. Amelia hesitated for a moment, then a feeling she couldn't ignore pushed her across the street. She knocked on the front door. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. With a growing sense of dread, she tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. The moment she stepped inside, the air hit her. It was thick, sharp with the smell of burnt paper and ozone. The lights flickered weakly, as if struggling to stay on. She looked around. Every clock on the wall read the same time, 2 a.m. "Dr. Vale?" she called out. "Adrian?" Only silence answered. Then she saw the fireplace. The ashes were still glowing a faint, sinister red. Hundreds of papers half-burned, their ink melting into unreadable shadows. But on the desk, right beside the fire, a single sheet had escaped the flames. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. It was a handwritten note. "You'll find me where time ends." Her pulse hammered in her ears. The handwriting was shaky, desperate, but it was the last line that sent a true chill down her spine. The signature, Dr. Adrian Vale, the man whose study she was standing in, the man who, according to the calendar on his wall, had an appointment scheduled with her for that very night. Amelia stumbled backward, her gaze catching on a small silver clock on his bookshelf. It was old, elegant, and looked broken, yet it was still ticking. Tick, tick, tick. Each sound was slower than the last, like the fading heartbeat of something dying. She turned it over. Carved into the back was a single cryptic phrase. "The hour is never gone. It just waits to be found." Her phone vibrated, jolting her back to reality. Unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. A distorted voice whispered through the static, calm and chillingly familiar. "Miss Cross, you shouldn't have read the note." She froze, her blood turning to ice. "Who is this?" "The clock started again because of you." And with that, the line went dead. She looked up, and her reflection in the dark window stared back at her. But just for a split second, she thought she saw a figure standing behind her in the reflection. She spun around. The room was empty. Every story has two sides, the truth and the version that's left behind. Every secret leaves a trace. Every crime hides a story. Welcome to Case Vault, where the truth is never truly buried. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the shadows. If you're intrigued by the mysteries that lie just beneath the surface, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. Detective Jonas Reed was a man who believed in patterns, not phantoms. In his world, every mystery, no matter how chaotic, eventually surrendered to logic. But tonight, standing in the dim living room of mystery writer Amelia Cross, logic was on the ropes. The clock on her wall was frozen, its hands pointing stubbornly to 2 a.m. It was like everything just stopped, Amelia said, her voice a soft tremble. She clutched her robe tighter, but Reed knew it wasn't fear he was seeing. He'd read her books, cold, precise dissections of crime. Amelia Cross didn't scare easily. He followed her to the kitchen. Her phone sat on the table, its screen glowing with the same frozen timestamp, 2 GM. Reed picked it up, pressing the power button. The screen flickered, then jumped an hour forward to 3:01 a.m. "It's been doing that since last night," she explained. "Like an hour just got cut out." "Phones glitch," Reed said, but even he didn't sound convinced. The real puzzle was in the back room. Amelia's security monitors displayed a perfect, uninterrupted recording of her quiet street. Midnight came and went. 1 a.m. passed peacefully. Then, at exactly 2 a.m., every single feed went black. Not static, not a flicker, just pure, inky silence that lasted for precisely 60 minutes. At 3 a.m., the world blinked back into existence as if nothing had happened. Reed leaned in, his eyes scanning the screens. "You didn't touch any of this?" "No. I was asleep. A noise woke me up." "What kind of noise?" She hesitated, her gaze distant. "Like glass breaking, but inside my head." He frowned. "Inside?" She nodded. "It wasn't a sound. It felt more like pressure." Reed jotted it down, his instincts screaming in a language he couldn't decipher. Their next stop was across the street, the home of Dr. Adrian Vale, Amelia's reclusive neighbor, and the last person she saw before the blackout. The front door was unlocked. A strange smell, a mix of metal and ash, hung in the air. The living room was pristine, but the study, it was a scene of methodical destruction. "God," Reed muttered. Every surface was covered in broken watches. Their faces were cracked, hands torn away, gears spilling out like tiny metallic entrails. Stacks of research papers were piled high on the desk, filled with diagrams of clock mechanisms, brain scans, and complex equations that looked disturbingly like formulas for memory decay. Amelia stood frozen in the doorway. "He was studying time perception," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He once told me people could lose time without even knowing it." Reed crouched beside the desk. The papers were singed at the edges, the center blackened as if something had burned its way out from within. But in the very middle of the charred pile, a single unscorched sheet of paper lay untouched. A note, written in Adrian's neat academic script. "You'll find me where time ends." Reed stood up slowly. "Was this here when you first came in?" Amelia nodded. "Yes, His car is still in the driveway, his coat is still on the hook, but he's gone. The detective's gaze drifted to the wall above the desk. A list of 10 names was pinned there. 9 of them were meticulously crossed out with thick black ink. The 10th name was left unmarked, Amelia Cross. Her breath hitched. Why would my name be there? Reed didn't have an answer. He was busy tracing faint circular marks burned into the wood of the desk, the ghost of a watch face pressed down until it smoked. Suddenly, a low, rhythmic humming filled the room. "Do you hear that?" Amelia whispered. Reed heard it. A low vibration, steady as a heartbeat, like a second hand ticking from somewhere unseen. He traced the sound to a small drawer beneath the desk. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, was a small brass pocket watch. Its glass was shattered and its hands were missing, but the ticking sound came from it clear as day. He reached in and picked it up. The moment his fingers closed around the cool metal, the ticking stopped. The lights in the study flickered violently. "Detective?" Amelia's voice quavered. Reed looked up. For a split second, the shadows on the walls seemed to stretch and twist, becoming longer, darker, impossibly distorted. The very air grew thick and heavy, warping like heat rising from summer asphalt. And then, just as quickly, it was over. He set the watch down carefully. "We'll send this to forensics," he said, his voice a mask of calm he didn't feel. "And I'll need to take your formal statement." As they were leaving the study, Amelia stopped him, her hand on his arm. "Detective, what if this isn't about time stopping? What if it's about time changing?" He turned to face her. "Explain." "Adrian once told me the brain filters our perception of time like a movie reel," she said. "What if last night the reel didn't just stop? What if it skipped a frame?" Reed let out a long, slow breath. "Miss Cross, I deal in facts and evidence, not science fiction." She offered a sad, knowing smile. "Then maybe you're in the wrong town, Detective." Later that night, back in the sterile quiet of his motel room, Reed replayed the security footage. The same sequence played out. A normal street, then the sudden plunge into 60 minutes of blackness. But this time he advanced the recording frame by painstaking frame. Just before the world went dark, he saw it. A single, fleeting frame of static. He zoomed in, his heart starting to pound. A blurred figure stood in the middle of the street. It wasn't Adrian Vale. It wasn't Amelia Cross. The figure's face was obscured, its entire outline shimmering, as if it were out of sync with reality. And clutched in its hand was a pocket watch. Reed's pulse hammered in his ears. He rewound, playing the single frame again. This time, the figure's head seemed to turn, slowly, deliberately, to look directly at the camera. The feed cut to black. For the first time in his 10-year career, Jonas Reed didn't sleep. He sat by his window, watching the motel room's cheap digital clock tick closer to the witching hour. At 1:59 a.m., he watched the seconds count down, each one feeling like an eternity. The second hand swept past the 12. The world held its breath. And at exactly 2:00 a.m., everything stopped. For days, I couldn't get the image out of my head. My name, Amelia Cross, the only one left on Adrian Vale's wall. It wasn't just a list. It was a record. And now I knew what kind. Patience. Every single name belonged to someone Adrian had once treated as a neuropsychologist. The university archives were a dead end. Most records were sealed, and a few were simply marked deceased. But the fragments I pieced together painted a chilling picture. Each patient had reported the same symptoms: sudden memory lapses, entire hours just erased from their lives, and vivid identical dreams. They all dreamt of being trapped in a long white hallway with no doors, a hallway that stretched on forever. And every single one of them had seen something waiting at the very end. One name wasn't crossed out: Ellen Frost, age 72, the final survivor. I found her in a small, dim care facility on the outskirts of Evermere. It was the kind of place where time already seemed to move differently, the air thick with the smell of antiseptic. A television murmured to an empty room. Ellen was waiting by the window when I arrived. She was thin and pale, but her eyes were still bright beneath her silver hair. When I introduced myself, a faint smile touched her lips, as if she'd been expecting me. "Adrian's friend," she said softly. "Or his ghost." "I'm neither," I replied. "I'm just trying to understand what happened to him." Ellen's hands trembled as she gestured for me to sit. "You won't like the answers," she warned. We talked for over an hour. Ellen spoke in fragments, her voice weaving through a maze of half-memories and strange scientific jargon. "He wanted to fix time," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "He believed trauma wasn't just in the mind. It was etched into time itself. That if you could just isolate the hour it happened, you could erase it completely." My heart tightened in my chest. Did he try it on you?" Ellen nodded slowly. "All of us. We were supposed to be set free from the pain, but something went wrong. Something broke. We stopped remembering the pain, but we also started forgetting everything else." Her gaze drifted past me to the rain sliding down the window pane. Then came the dreams, the hallway, the feeling that something was always watching. "What was it?" I asked, leaning in. Ellen's eyes flicked back to me, suddenly sharp and lucid. "Not what?" she corrected. "When?" I frowned, confused. "When?" She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "When the clock stops, don't move." "What do you mean by that?" "That's when they look back." The words hung between us like a thick fog. I left soon after, her warning echoing in my mind the entire drive home. That night, I had no intention of sleeping. I brewed coffee, I paced, I did everything I could to stay awake, but exhaustion is a patient hunter. It won. The digital clock on my nightstand read 1:54 a.m. The steady rhythm of the rain outside was almost comforting. I dreamt of nothing until I woke up. The clock now read 2 a.m., and the world was silent. Not just quiet, it was a profound, absolute silence that seemed to swallow sound itself. Even the constant ticking of the old clock on my wall had stopped mid-beat. I looked toward the window. The rain outside hung motionless, thousands of droplets frozen in mid-air like tiny beads of glass. My breath caught in my throat. Ellen's words screamed in my mind. "When the clock stops, don't move." I sat perfectly still, my heart hammering against my ribs as if trying to escape. The air in the room felt thicker now, heavier, so dense I could almost taste it on my tongue. Then I saw it. In the full-length mirror across the hallway, dimly lit by the moonlight, was my reflection. But it wasn't right. My body was frozen in place, but my reflection was breathing. And behind it, someone was standing in the dark. A faint silhouette, tall and thin, its head tilted slightly as if it were listening for something. The shape flickered like television static, its edges rippling and distorting, as if time itself couldn't decide whether it truly belonged there. My instincts took over. I spun around, my eyes scanning the real hallway. It was empty. There was nothing there. Trembling, I forced myself to look back at the mirror. The figure was closer now, right behind my reflection. Its presence was suffocating. Suddenly, the light in the room flickered once, a single violent pulse of blue-white energy, and in an instant, everything crashed back into motion. The rain started falling again. The wall clock resumed its familiar ticking, and my reflection in the mirror matched my every terrified movement once more. I glanced at my bedside clock. It was 3:00 a.m. An entire hour had vanished. I stood there shaking, every instinct I had screaming that I had been seen. But by what? I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my hand unsteady. The screen glowed faintly with a new message, A message I hadn't written. A message that had no sender, no number, just the text and a timestamp at the top of the screen. 2 RAM. The words were simple and more terrifying than anything I could have imagined. Don't move next time. By the fourth night, Amelia Cross stopped pretending this was just curiosity. It had become something else entirely, an infection of the mind, a fever that was spreading through her every thought. The police had given up, you see. Detective Reed, who had once been so persistent, had gone completely silent. She suspected he was still watching from the shadows, but her calls went unanswered, her emails unread. The note from Adrian Vale was pinned right above her desk, a constant nagging presence. 5 words that now felt less like a message and more like a command. You all find me where time ends. Adrian's research files were a nightmare to track down. She'd managed to steal bits and pieces from archived university databases, and they all pointed to a single cryptic project, chronostasis cognitive mapping. Every single paper carried the same funding line from a place called the Department of Neurotemporal Studies. But the funding had been terminated abruptly 2 years ago. That date? It aligned perfectly with the death of Adrian's last recorded patient. All of them. Except one. Her. It was well past midnight when she finally drove through the wrought iron gates of Evermere University. The rain was coming down hard, slicking the pavement and distorting the yellow lamplight into long, weeping streaks. It looked like time itself was melting right before her eyes. The campus security office was eerily empty. No guard, no logbook, just the faint, almost imperceptible hum of an unseen generator somewhere in the distance. She parked her car near the neuroscience building, her breath fogging up the cold glass of the windshield. Adrian's old lab was on the 3rd floor, room 3B12. The door was sealed with a modern electronic panel, but the side window, conveniently, had been broken long ago and never repaired. She squeezed through the narrow gap, landing as softly as she could inside the darkened room. The air was thick with the smell of stale dust and machine oil. Her flashlight cut a sharp beam through the darkness, sweeping across a scene of total chaos. Overturned equipment, a dozen empty coffee cups, and papers scattered across the floor like fallen snow. But beyond the lab benches, hidden behind a partition of smoked glass, she found something far stranger. A soundproof chamber. Its door was heavy, industrial, the kind you'd see in a high-security facility. It had a single, thick observation window and a keypad beside it. This wasn't for simple experiments. This was for containment. She crept closer, peering through the glass. Faint red lights blinked from within, and then she saw them. Rows upon rows of clocks lining the walls. Hundreds of them. Each one was ticking at a completely different rhythm. Some raced forward at a frantic pace, others crawled as if struggling against the weight of a century. Some even skipped beats entirely. The result was maddening. A living, chaotic heartbeat made of pure temporal dissonance. Amelia's hand trembled as she reached for the keypad on the door. She typed in a random sequence of numbers, just a shot in the dark. Nothing. Then, a memory sparked. Adrian's birthday. He'd written it once in the dedication of one of his research papers. Her fingers flew across the pad, entering the date. With a sharp, definitive click, the lock disengaged. The sound inside hit her not as volume, but as pressure. The competing tick of so many clocks was a sound her brain simply couldn't process, couldn't find a rhythm in. It was like stepping directly into a storm of seconds. On a central table inside the chamber sat a stack of files. Some were charred at the edges, others were neatly sealed in plastic sleeves. She began flipping through them, her pulse quickening with every page turn. Each file was labeled with a name and an experiment number. Experiment 1, Subject D, Frost. Experiment 2, Subject H, Mason. Experiment 3, Subject K, Monroe. She kept flipping, a cold dread creeping into her veins. She recognized every single name from the list on Adrian's wall, and every single file was stamped with the same word, terminated. Then she reached the very last folder. Her blood ran cold. Experiment 9, Cross, A. Her own name. Her hand froze above the page. The paper inside was thin, clinical. It was filled with data points, her brainwave patterns, her time logs. Each test documented her sleep cycles, her REM activity, her dreams. She read the observations with a growing, sickening horror. Subject exhibits natural chronesthetic awareness, strong temporal anchoring at trauma marker, Rata di Gei. Procedure, isolate and erase the hour. Amelia's chest tightened, making it hard to breathe. Trauma marker? 2 a.m.? What happened at 2 a.m.? She shakily turned the page. The next line was scrawled in Adrian's familiar handwriting. Subject aware of interference. Temporal field unstable. Warning. Breach detected. Containment failed. And below that, written later in a different, hastier pen, a final chilling note. Subject broke the pattern. Subject vanished. She stumbled backward, the files slipping from her grasp. The clocks seemed to pulse louder now, faster, surrounding her like 1,000 frantic, beating hearts. "What did you do to me?" she whispered into the cacophony. The answer came not in words, but in the sudden, deafening change of sound. Every single clock stopped at once. The silence slammed into her chest like a physical force. The red lights dimmed one by one, plunging the room into near darkness. Amelia looked up and saw movement through the glass. A figure was standing just outside the chamber. At first, she thought it was Detective Reed. The silhouette was tall, motionless, human. But as it stepped closer, she realized the edges of its form shimmered, distorting the air around it like heat rising from asphalt. Its face was smooth, utterly featureless, except for faint ripples where its eyes should have been. Ripples that seemed to bend reality itself. Her body was locked in place, frozen by a primal fear she'd never known. Then, the lights inside the chamber flickered back on, illuminating the table. A small circular device sat beside the files she'd dropped. It was half mechanical, half organic, its center pulsing with a faint blue glow. A portable time field generator. Adrian's notes echoed in her mind. Map a person's memory onto a time pattern. Erase trauma by isolating the hour. He'd tried to remove her pain, whatever had happened at 2 a.m. all those years ago, but something had gone wrong. The pattern had fractured. She hadn't been healed. She'd been unanchored from time itself. She looked again through the glass. The figure outside was gone. In its place, her own reflection stared back at her, only it blinked half a second too late. Pure instinct took over. Amelia grabbed the files, snatched the strange device, and ran. Down the hallway, the emergency lights flickered in strange waves. The world itself seemed slightly out of sync, as if frames of reality were skipping, the very air stuttering between seconds. She could still hear the echo of ticking, even though the clocks in the lab were silent now, a ticking that came from somewhere deep inside her own head. As she burst out into the cold, driving rain, her phone buzzed violently in her pocket. Unknown number. She answered, breathless. "Hello?" There was a burst of static, and then a familiar voice, distorted and distant, as if calling from across an ocean, Adrian's voice. "Amelia, don't go back to sleep. That's when they find the cracks." The line went dead. Amelia stood alone in the rain, clutching the folder that bore her name. And from the building behind her, the clocks began ticking again. But this time, she wasn't sure if they were in the building or if they were inside her. 40 hours. That's how long I'd been awake, staring at the ghosts on my evidence wall. Photos of Amelia Cross, Adrian Vale, the old house, and a dozen broken clocks, all mocking me. Every single clue, every dead end, pointed to the same impossible moment, 2 a.m. The hour that shouldn't exist. I'd replayed the security footage from Amelia's house until my eyes burned. Every night, like clockwork, at precisely 2 a.m., her system would black out. But tonight, something was different. Something was wrong. My own system logs, my entire investigation, wiped clean. No data, no access records. Someone had reached into my world and erased my work. This wasn't the first time the town of Evermere had lost an hour. I dove into the archives, digging through dusty, forgotten files. Temporal disturbance reports, they were called. Most were dismissed as simple malfunctions or power outages. But one report, dated exactly 1 year before Adrian Vale vanished, grabbed me. The names attached to it hit me like a punch to the gut. Thomas Cross and Amelia Cross. I froze. Amelia's husband. She never mentioned being married. The more I dug, the deeper the rabbit hole went. Thomas Cross, an architect, 38 years old, presumed missing after a domestic incident near the Evermere Bridge. No body ever found. The strangest part? The entire report was sealed just days after it was filed by a university request. A request that came directly from Adrian Vale's account. My mind raced. Adrian wasn't a cop or a government agent. How could he possibly have the clearance to seal a police file? I needed more. I cross-referenced the archives with hospital records from that same night, and then my stomach dropped. Amelia Cross. Admitted to St. Huron Medical Center the very night her husband disappeared. The diagnosis, severe shock, and a dissociative state. She was unconscious for 72 hours, 3 full days. But that couldn't be right. In her statement, she swore she remembered everything. The timelines were a mangled mess. Her memory was a seamless recording of the event, yet hospital records showed she was in a coma. It was a gap, an erased hour that had somehow stretched into 3 erased days. I printed everything. Medical charts, timestamps, police reports. A single, scribbled note from the attending physician caught my eye. Subject speaks of frozen rain. Believes time stopped. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I thought of Amelia's terrified face in my office, her hushed words about seeing someone behind her in a mirror. I heard Ellen Frost's cryptic warning echoing in my head. When the clock stops, don't move. This wasn't a delusion. It was a memory, a stolen one. That evening, I had to see her. I drove to Amelia's house under a bruised gray sky. Before I could even knock, the door creaked open. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her entire body rigid with tension. She knew. "You found something," she said, her voice flat. "Your husband," I replied, stepping inside. "Thomas. He vanished a year ago, didn't he?" She hesitated for just a second too long. "You looked at the police report?" "It's gone," I told her. "Someone deleted it from the department database. They used Adrian Vale's credentials to do it." Amelia's breath hitched. "Adrian wouldn't—" "He did," I cut in, my voice firm. "And there's more. The hospital records. They show you were unconscious for 3 days after your husband disappeared, but you told me you remember everything. The night he vanished, the investigation, every detail." "I do," she insisted, her voice trembling. "I remember the rain, the power flickering. Thomas was walking toward the window, and then—" She trailed off, her gaze lost in the past. "Then the sound just stopped." "Stopped?" She nodded slowly. "It was like the whole world held its breath. And when it came back, he was gone." My pen hovered over my notebook. "And the time?" I asked softly. Her voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. 2 o'clock, exactly." I stared at her, the pieces clicking into a terrifying picture. "You don't remember being in the hospital?" "No," she said, confused. "Why would I?" I laid the files out on her kitchen table, the stark black and white of the reports contrasting with the warm wood. "Because according to these, you were in a coma. You didn't wake up for 3 days. And when you did, Adrian Vale was the one who signed your discharge papers. The color drained from Amelia's face. That's not possible. It's all right here, I said gently. Adrian was there. He was with you the whole time. Whatever happened to your husband, whatever really happened that night, he covered it up. She collapsed into a chair, her eyes distant, staring at a memory she couldn't access. He told me he could fix it, she whispered. He told me he could fix time. I leaned forward, my heart pounding in my chest. Fix what, Amelia? What did he need to fix? Her voice cracked, thick with a year of buried grief. The hour I lost him. As if on cue, a low rumble of thunder shook the house. We both looked up at the old clock on her wall. The second hand ticked once, twice, and then stopped. My blood ran cold. The hands were frozen. 2 a.m. For days after the clocks froze, I couldn't sleep. Every sound in my house felt off. The kitchen clock ticked just a fraction too slow. The refrigerator hummed like a skipping record. Even when I moved, my own reflection seemed to lag a split second behind. Detective Reed, he begged me not to stay alone, but I had to. I refused to leave. Something in these walls was calling to me, a feeling older and deeper than fear. Adrian's voice, it was still echoing in my head from that night. You will find me where time ends. And now, it felt like time was calling back. It started small. The first echo happened one morning. I was reaching for my coffee and the mug just slipped, shattering all over the kitchen floor. But before I could even gasp, everything snapped backward. The broken pieces flew together. My hand was suddenly holding the whole mug again, and I was just standing there, my heart pounding in my chest. I had just watched time rewind itself. It lasted less than 3 seconds. At first I thought it was just shock, some kind of hallucination. But then it happened again. This time I was on the phone with Reed. My own words started to overlap, repeating like a broken record. Jonas, I think something's wrong. Jonas, I think something's wrong. And then just silence. I looked at my phone. The timer read 2:37 a.m., but I swore it was the middle of the day. That number, 2:37, it felt like it was burned into my mind. Over the next few nights, the echoes got stronger, more frequent. Furniture would be slightly out of place when I turned my back. The curtains would flutter when there was no wind. The digital clock next to my bed would just flicker, back and forth between 2:36 and 2:37, like it couldn't decide which moment it belonged to. It was driving me mad. One night, I just found myself standing in the hallway. I had no memory of walking there. I looked at the mirror at the end of the hall and it reflected me, but a heartbeat behind. It was like an afterimage struggling to catch up with the present. And then, for just a moment, my reflection smiled. But I wasn't smiling. The air in the house turned ice cold. The lights dimmed until they were just a faint, pulsing glow. And I could hear it, the faint ticking of hundreds of clocks, all distant, like they were in another room, or maybe another century entirely. My voice trembled when I spoke. Adrian? The sound that answered me wasn't a voice. It was a high, crystalline chime, like a tiny watch winding itself somewhere in the dark. I turned around, and he was standing right there, Dr. Adrian Vale, alive. He looked exactly how I remembered him. The same gray coat, the same piercing blue eyes, but he was translucent. His edges were flickering like a character caught between frames of a film. Adrian? I whispered, my voice barely audible. You're alive? He just shook his head gently. No, Amelia, not alive, but not exactly gone either. My throat felt tight. Where did you go? What happened that night at the lab? He stepped closer, and as he moved, the whole world around us shimmered. The hallway blurred, reversing and fast-forwarding in these jerky little fragments. I saw the rain outside rewind itself back up into the sky, a single drop unfalling from the window pane. "I didn't disappear," he said quietly. "I stepped out." "Out of what?" I asked, my pulse racing. He raised a hand that was almost transparent and pressed his fingers to my wrist. It was faint, but I could feel warmth. Real, human warmth. "Out of time," he said. My heart was hammering against my ribs.
"Adrian, what did you do to me? I'm seeing things. I'm hearing things."
He gave me this sad little smile.
"You're not hallucinating, Amelia. You're phasing. You're remembering the moments that haven't happened yet. You're feeling the echoes of the missing hour."
"I don't understand any of this," I stammered. "You don't have to," he said. "You only have to see." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small silver pocket watch. The metal gleamed with this unnatural brightness in the dim light. Its cover was etched with a spiral pattern that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at it. "I built this to anchor the passage," he murmured. "A compass for the places clocks can't follow. It's linked to the experiment, and to you." I stared at the watch, mesmerized. "Linked? How?" "Your mind bridges the gap," he explained. "You were the only subject who survived the synchronization failure, the only one who could remember what it felt like when time broke." My breath caught in my throat. I had to ask, "And Thomas, is he?" Adrian's image flickered, fading in and out. "He's still inside. You can reach him, but only halfway through the hour, when the clock stops moving forward at 2:37. He pressed the pocket watch into my palm. The metal burned cold against my skin. The second hand on its face was frozen, ticking endlessly on the same single point. "Adrian, wait, don't go!" I cried out. But his figure was already dissolving, unraveling into these streams of light that faded into the air. His voice drifted through the static hum of the house. "Remember, Amelia, don't chase the end of time. Let it come to you." And then he was gone. The hallway snapped back into focus. The rain outside resumed its fall. The ticking of all the clocks in the house roared back into my ears, deafening. I was standing alone, clutching the pocket watch. The time on its face read 2:37 a.m., exactly halfway through the missing hour. I could feel my own pulse starting to align with its silent, frozen rhythm. For a single moment, the second hand on the watch twitched. Then it stopped, and everything, sound, light, my own thoughts, fell perfectly, terrifyingly still. The hour was here, and I knew what I had to do. Thank you so much for watching this story unfold. If you're as intrigued as I am to find out what happens next, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you do not miss the next chapter. We're just getting started. The coordinates engraved inside the silver pocket watch pulsed faintly, like a tiny heartbeat trapped in cold metal. I ran my thumb over them again and again, whispering the numbers like a prayer. Detective Reed leaned over my kitchen table, his brow furrowed in a deep frown. "That's north of town, way up near Evermere Ridge." "The old observatory," I murmured, a memory surfacing. "Adrian used to work there before his funding got pulled." Reed raised a skeptical eyebrow. "That place burned down years ago." "Not completely," I said, closing the watch with a soft, final click. "It's where he left the message. I can feel it." He let out a long, weary sigh, holstering his flashlight. "You know, Amelia, I'm really starting to hate when you say things like that." We drove through the fog-drenched outskirts of Evermere, the headlights cutting through the thick mist in two thin white beams. Soon the town lights vanished behind us, replaced by the silhouettes of twisted trees and the hollow, mournful sound of the wind. When we finally reached the ridge, the observatory loomed out of the darkness like a ruin from another century. Its rusted dome was cracked open to the sky, and thick vines crawled across its crumbling stone walls. A faint, almost imperceptible hum drifted from inside, a low, rhythmic vibration that felt almost mechanical. Reed shut off the engine, turning to me. "If this place collapses on us, I'm blaming you." But I was already out of the car, the pocket watch in my hand now glowing with a soft, steady light. Each tick echoed louder as I climbed the stone steps, the sound leading me toward the massive, imposing doors. They creaked open on their own, as if welcoming me home. Inside, the air was cold and carried a strange metallic tang. The smell of old oil, dust, and ozone filled the vast chamber. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust, and when they did, my breath caught in my throat. There were dozens, no, hundreds of clocks. They hung from the walls, were stacked on shelves, and mounted on strange metal arms. Every single one ticked at a different pace, some frantic and fast, some agonizingly slow, some even ticking backward. In the exact center of the room stood a single chair. Its leather was cracked and worn, and it was bolted firmly to the floor. Facing it was a massive circular mirror, taller than either of us. Its surface shimmered with a faint internal light, even though there was nothing for it to reflect. Reed shone his flashlight around the bizarre collection. "This looks like a shrine to madness." I didn't answer. I was walking toward the mirror, my footsteps echoing on the cold metal floor. The closer I got, the louder the ticking became, thousands of clocks overlapping until the sound was no longer mechanical, but something organic, like a living, breathing heartbeat. Just then, a terminal on a nearby table flickered to life. Green lines of text scrolled across its cracked screen. I leaned closer to read it. Experiment log, entry, 12, temporal interface test, successful, field activation. Note, the mirror is not reflection, it's return. I read the words aloud, my voice trembling. Return, not reflection. Reed frowned, his light landing on the terminal. What in the world does that mean? I turned back to face the mirror. He didn't build this to look at time, I whispered, the realization hitting me with the force of a physical blow. He built it to step inside it. Reed's hand shot out, catching my arm. Amelia, don't. We have no idea if that thing is safe. But it was already too late. The mirror was shifting. Its surface rippled like liquid silver, the reflection warping, colors bleeding through the silvery sheen. And then, I saw it. My living room, rain streaking down the window panes. And Thomas. Thomas was standing near the door, his back to me, the clock on the wall frozen at exactly 2 a.m. My breath hitched. That's the night he vanished. Amelia, Reed warned, his voice tight with alarm. Whatever this is, it's not real. It's a trick. I took a step closer, unable to look away. It's real. It's my memory. Then let it stay that way, he pleaded. But the mirror pulsed again, stronger this time. A strange force pulling at me, drawing my reflection forward until it felt like it was about to break free. The air around me vibrated, my hair lifting as static electricity filled the room. In the reflection, Thomas turned. His eyes, my Thomas's eyes, met mine, and he mouthed my name. Amelia. Thomas, I whispered, reaching out. Reed's voice cut through the deafening roar of the ticking clocks. Amelia, don't you dare! My fingers brushed against the glass. It was warm. It felt alive. The surface rippled outward from my touch, swallowing my hand whole. The entire world bent around me, sound stretching thin like melted metal. Amelia! Reed shouted, lunging forward to grab me. But I was already gone. Pulled through the shimmering surface in a blinding flash of white light that shook the very walls of the observatory. And then, in an instant, every single clock stopped. Reed stumbled back, blinking against the sudden, shocking silence. He stared at the mirror, which had stilled. Its surface was perfect again, showing only his own reflection, pale, trembling, and utterly alone in the vast, quiet room. He looked down. On the floor, where I had been standing, lay the silver pocket watch, Its hands were spinning wildly, a blur of gold before they suddenly froze. Right at 2 a.m., when my feet left the observatory floor, the world pulled me apart. Everything stretched into a blinding white emptiness. I stumbled, landing on a surface that wasn't solid, but somehow held me. When I opened my eyes, I was in a corridor that vanished into a horizon of sterile light. The walls shimmered and the floor reflected my image, but my reflection was a beat behind, a ghostly echo of myself. My heart was a drum against my ribs. This was it. The hallway from the patient's dreams, the one Ellen Frost had warned me about. When the clock stops, don't move. That's when they look back. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to run through the mirror I'd come from. But I couldn't. I had to find Thomas. I forced myself to take a step. As I approached the first door, it shimmered. There was no handle, no hinges. But when I reached out, the surface rippled like water. With a soft click, it opened. Inside was my wedding day. Sunlight poured through the chapel windows. My father, alive and smiling, walked me down the aisle. At the altar stood Thomas, his eyes full of hope. I could smell the flowers, hear the gentle music. Tears welled in my eyes. "Thomas," I whispered. But as I stepped closer, a clock struck 2 in the morning. The illusion shattered. The colors bled into white, and he was gone. The door slammed shut, leaving me back in the sterile corridor. Another door began to glow. I approached it. It was my first book signing. I could hear the applause, my own nervous laughter. The scent of fresh ink and paper filled the air. I touched the scene, feeling the warmth of that memory, the pride of my success. I reached for it, but it dissolved before my fingers could grasp it. My chest tightened. This corridor seemed to pulse with time itself. I opened another door. It was the night before Thomas disappeared. The argument. I heard my own frantic voice, his pained replies. Harsh words thrown like stones. A slammed door. My fingers itched to reach back, to change it all, to unsay those words. But I remembered Adrian's warning. This wasn't about changing the past. It was about observing it, learning from it. Each door was a frozen fragment of my life, and every single one pulled at me with an unbearable weight. And then I understood. This corridor wasn't just a hallway. It was a repository of lives, trapped moments, fragments of existence frozen in the missing hour between 2 and 3 in the morning. At the far end of the corridor, I saw a figure standing in the pale light. Adrian Vale. He looked older, worn, his coat singed, and his hands blackened with ash that never fell. In his arms, he held a bundle of burnt research notes, their edges curled, but the smoke suspended in the air, frozen. "Adrian!" I called out, my voice trembling with a mix of relief and fury. "You shouldn't be here, Amelia," he said, his voice soft and tired. I marched toward him. "You brought me here. You built all of this." "I didn't build it," he replied quietly. "I only found it. The corridor existed between seconds. I just learned how to open the door." My voice cracked. "Why? Why would you do this?" He gestured to the endless doors surrounding us. "I tried to save people, the patients who lost moments of their lives they could never get back. I thought if I could just freeze time, I could pull them out. But every attempt failed." Tears started to form in my eyes. And Thomas? His own eyes filled with a deep, bottomless sorrow. He wasn't supposed to be part of it. That night, the field expanded unexpectedly. He got caught in it. I shook my head, refusing to accept it. "Then bring him back." Adrian lifted his hands helplessly. "Every time I try, the hour resets. People vanish, slipping into this corridor. Their lives become fragments, trapped behind these doors. I keep the clocks running so the ones who are still awake can navigate safely, but the cost is always someone lost." My gaze darted from door to door, each one flickering with a life that wasn't mine to touch, but was impossible to ignore. "Then tell me where he is." I need to know. Adrian took a step closer, his expression pleading. If you stay too long, you'll be trapped too. The hour will reset. And all of this, the corridor, the doors, Thomas, it will all vanish from your memory. You'll wake up back in the world outside, believing none of this ever happened. My chest heaved with a sob I couldn't hold back. I don't care. I have to see it. I have to find him. The corridor began to thrum, vibrating under my feet. The light rippled and doors started opening and slamming shut all at once, revealing flashes of joy, laughter, fear, and grief. My entire life broken into frozen memories. Adrian's face twisted in anguish. Amelia, please, leave now, before the hour ends. But I squared my shoulders, my resolve hardening like steel. No, I'm not leaving without the truth about Thomas. The hum rose to a deafening roar. The white light pulsed, and the walls began to bend like heat rising from asphalt. Adrian's voice echoed above the chaos, fading into static. The hour always takes what it's owed. My hand shot forward, gripping the edge of a single door. Beyond it, I could feel him. Thomas, waiting, trapped between moments. And without a second thought, I stepped through. Thank you so much for joining me on this part of the journey. Imagine this. A silent, forgotten observatory perched atop Evermere Ridge, its cracked dome gleaming under the pale moonlight. This is where our story finds Reed, his heart pounding a frantic rhythm against his ribs. For hours he's been waiting, circling the structure, a lone flashlight cutting through the darkness. He's watching for a sign, any sign of Amelia. And then, it happens. At exactly 3 a.m., the observatory doesn't just glow, it explodes with light. A violent surge illuminates the rusted machinery and tangled wires inside, revealing hundreds of clocks lining the walls. Every single one is frozen, except for a solitary silver pocket watch on the central console. Its second hand moves with an eerie deliberation. Once, twice, and then stops dead at 3:01 a.m. Reed doesn't hesitate. Every instinct screams danger, but the terrifying thought that Amelia has been pulled back into that strange, lost hour pushes him forward. The observatory doors are unlocked, swinging open as if beckoning him into the abyss. The air inside is thick with the smell of ozone and burnt metal. It's a graveyard of technology. The machines are still, the wires limp, some sparking faintly like the last beats of a dying heart. The clocks on the walls, the digital readouts on the consoles, all are dark, silent, and frozen. Everything is dead to time. Everything except that one pocket watch. Its soft, insistent ticking is a heartbeat completely out of sync with the world. Reed approaches the console, his hands trembling as he picks up the watch. He feels its cold, metallic weight. "Amelia?" he calls out, his voice swallowed by the vast, echoing silence. He scans the room, every chair, every console, every instrument. She's not here. She's gone. It's as if the strange world she entered has swallowed her whole. Then, his eyes fall on a desk belonging to a man named Adrian. Amidst charred research papers lies a note written in fresh, neat ink. The handwriting is unmistakably Adrian's. Reed reads the words aloud, his voice barely a whisper. Time doesn't heal. It hides. A shiver crawls down his spine. Hides what? Reed mutters, his mind racing. Where is she? He frantically searches every shadow, every corner, the rows of stopped clocks, but Amelia is nowhere to be found. Defeated, he looks out the window at the town of Evermere sleeping peacefully below, completely oblivious to the temporal storm that just unfolded. Somewhere out there, he knows, a fragment of the missing hour still exists. Reed pockets the watch, its steady ticking now a strange comfort in the oppressive silence. He leaves the observatory, closing the door on its eerie stillness, and heads back into town, back to Amelia's home. But the disturbance isn't over. Another awaits him there. In the quiet of Amelia's house, her computer sits on the desk, screen dark. But then, it stirs. Keys begin to move, pressed by unseen hands, the soft clicks echoing through the empty rooms. Words appear on the blank screen, slow at first, then with a fluid, haunting certainty. It's as if memory itself is typing. A title line freezes Reed in place. The Disappearing Hour. He leans closer, his heart pounding in his chest. And then, the author line scrolls beneath it, appearing letter by letter. By Amelia Cross and Dr. Adrian Vale. Reed swallows hard, his eyes darting around the room. But he's alone. The ghostly rhythm of the keyboard continues, weaving a story page after page. The words form a narrative he can almost hear spoken aloud, a voice that's a chilling blend of Amelia's fierce determination and Adrian's obsessive intellect. The story is writing itself. Her life, the missing hour, another name, Thomas, the corridor of doors, the frozen moments of time. Every sentence confirms his deepest fear. Amelia crossed a boundary she couldn't cross back from. She entered the hour and didn't return, at least not in any way he can understand. But she left something behind, a trace. Her mind and memory projected into these words, anchored somehow by the silver pocket watch ticking away in his pocket, somewhere between the seconds. He runs his hands over the still typing keyboard. The story is a torrent now, filling the screen chapter after chapter. It details the hour she lived through, the doors made of memories, Adrian's chilling confessions, the souls lost and trapped within time, and a fleeting, heartbreaking glimpse of Thomas. Every line is precise, horrifying, and beautiful. It's proof that the missing hour has left its indelible mark on her. Then, the hum of the typing slows. A final line appears, leaving Reed breathless. Time takes what it must, but even lost hours leave traces, if you know how to look. The cursor blinks once, twice, and then goes still. Silence returns. Reed leans back, pulling the pocket watch from his coat. It still reads 3:01 a.m. The hour has ended. The world has returned to normal. But in some hidden, impossible space between seconds, Amelia remains. And her story, their story, has just begun. He knows, with a chilling certainty, that the missing hour isn't gone. It's just waiting. And now, for the first time, a record of it exists. What an incredible, mind-bending journey. It leaves us with so many questions. What is the missing hour? And what will Reed do with this impossible manuscript? If this story grabbed you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Thank you for listening, and until next time, keep looking for the traces left behind.